So in this lesson, we are going to find the answers to the percent question. So the first question is, what number is 80% of 60? So using mental math, you already know 100% of 60 is 60. 100% of any number, 100% of any number is going to be the number itself. So 80% is very close to 100%. So it will be the answer will be very close to 60 but less than 60. So what is 10% of 60? So if 100% of 60 is 60, if you divide 100 by 10, you get 10%. So 10% of 60 would be 60 divided by 10, which is 6. So 10% of 60 is 6. Now you can easily find 80%. So 80% of 60 will be, if you multiply 10 by 8, you get 80. So you multiply 6 by 8, which is 48. So 80% of 60 equal to 48. That's using mental math. And how do I use that? How do I find the answer using a bar diagram? For bar diagram, we normally use a rectangle or a bar where like the whole, this is one whole. So one whole means it's 100% and 100% is going to be 60. And if you divide the one whole into 10 equal parts, so say it's like this is 50%, about 50%. So 10, 20, 30, 40, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 50, then 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. And all the like they're all like equal to each other. So this is like 10%. So one box is 10% and 10% is going to be 6. 10% is 6. Like that, you need to shade 8 boxes. So this is 10%. Now if I shade one more, that is going to be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, and 80. So 80% would be 8 times 6, which is going to be 8 times 6, which is 48. That is another method you can use to find the percent of a number. And the next one is a proportion method. How do I use proportion to find the answer? So they asked you 80% of 60. So find 80% of 60. So 80% means I already have one ratio. Proportion means I should get two ratios. So 80 over 100 is one ratio. And the next part, 80% of 60. So 60 is the whole. 60 is the big part. And what is the part of 60? So that is x. So x over 60 equal to 80 over 100. And we learned how to solve proportions, how to find the unknown. So it's better to use equivalent fractions because here it's very easy because you can just multiply. You can just decompose this 8 times 10 over 10 times 10. So this is 1. So we got x over 60 equal to 8/10. And how do I make the denominator same? So the denominator of this is 60 and here it is 10. So if I multiply 10 by 6, I get 60, but I have to multiply with the same quantity, the numerator also, because otherwise the value will change. Now the value won't change because 6 over 6 is going to be 1. So you get x over 60 equal to 48 over 60. So that means the denominators are same. So the numerators have to be same. So x is equal to 48. That's another method using proportion. In some problems this will be easier. Some problems you can just do it as mental math. Another method is using the equation, percent equations. So find 80% of 60. That is the question. Now we are converting this into an equation. So find x. So x equal to 80% of 60. So 80 over 100. And in math, of means multiplication of 60 or 60 over 1. So when you do that, you will get x is equal to, you can decompose, and this is easy to multiply also. 8 times 6 is 48 and there are 2 zeros. So 4800 divided by 100, you will get 48. How many hundreds are there in 4800? You will get 48. So find 80% of 60. You just multiply 60 by 80 over 100, or you can just multiply that with 0.8, which is the decimal form of 60. No, I'm sorry, decimal form of 80%. Hope you understand this, and we will do more problems. Now let's look at another problem. It's 120% of 70. So 120% of 70 is more than 100%. So the answer is going to be more than 100% of that number, which is 70. So your answer is going to be more than 70. So it's better to have an idea of a reasonable answer. So you can always look back to your answer and see whether the answer is reasonable. So 120% means it's more than 100 degree. More than 100%. So that means it is going to be more than 70. So let's look at that. How do I use the Mendel math? So let's see what is 10% of 70. 10% of 70 is going to be 1/10 of 70, which is, if you divide 70 into 10 equal parts, it's going to be 7. So 10% of 70 is 7. So what is 120% of 70? So that means how many tens are there in 120? So if you multiply 10% by 12, you will get 120%. So you will multiply 7 by 12. So you will get 84. 84 will be the answer for 120% of 70 is 84, because it is more than 100%, and so it's 100% plus 20%. So 100% of 70 is 70 plus another 20% means 2 times 7, which is 14. So 70 plus 14, which is going to be 84. So 120% of 70 is 84. So you should have an idea like of a reasonable answer. So you can always look back and check. And bar diagram will be one whole, that is 100% would be 100% is 70. So 120% I will add another 20%, that is 10%, and another 10%, that's 20%, and 10% of 70 is 7, so that is 7, and there is another 7. So 100% plus 20%, I added another 20%, so that is 120% would be 70 plus 7 plus 7, which is going to be 84. Now, how do I use proportion? So let's look at the proportion, and let's see how do I use it. And you already know proportion, like two ratios, those are equal to each other. So we are looking for two equivalent ratios, right? We learned that in the last lesson. Two equivalent ratios are called proportion. So now let's look at the same problem. How can we do using proportion? Proportion means there will be two ratios, and those two ratios are going to be equal to each other. So one ratio we already know, the question is 120% of 70. So one ratio is going to be 120 over 100. That is the fraction, and of 70 means 70 is the whole and part will go on the top. So x over 70 is equal to 120 over 100. Now you can simplify, that is 120 I can write 12 times 10, 100 I can write 10 times 10. So 10 divided by 10 is 1. So I can get x over 70 is equal to 12 over 10. How do I make the denominator same? You can 10 to 70, you can just multiply by 7 on both numerator and denominator, and that is a form of 1. So the value won't change. So I'll get 84 over 70. So x over 70 is equal to 84 over 70. The denominators are same. So x will be 84. So the answer is going to be 84. 120% of 70 is equal to 84. And the last method is percent equation. In percent equation, you can just add the you can just multiply the percent by the number. So that means percent equation is, let's look at this, 120% of 70, and in math of means multiplication, and 120% you can either write 120 over 100, or you can write the decimal form, which is 1.2. It's more than 1, so it's 1.2 times 70. So x is equal to 1.2 times 70, which is going to be, when you multiply, you will get 84.0. X is equal to 84.0. So the answer is going to be 84. 120% of 70 is 84. So these are the four different methods you can use, and when you get like big numbers or decimal numbers, it's better to use the last two methods, proportion and percent equation. So let's look at the next problem. How can you use models to estimate percent question? It is 4/10% of 40. So it's not even 1%. It's not 10%. So it will be hard for you to connect that to 10%. And 100, you already know 100% of 40 is going to be 40, and 10% of 40 is 4, and 1% of 40 is going to be, you need to uh, take 1/10 of 4, so that means 4/10. So that's 1%. So 0.4% is going to be um, less than half of this. So less than 2/10. So 0.4%. So let's try to use proportion. So you already know one proportion is 0.4 over 100 because it's 0.4%. So the fraction form is that, and the total, the whole part is like 40. 100% of 40 is 40, and we don't know what is 0.4% of that. So x over 40 is equal to 0.4 over 100 is the proportion for that. Now, how can I use the, is there a way I can use the equivalent fractions? Like, can I make the denominator as 40? So if I divide both sides by 10, I will get, so if I can divide by 10 and divide by 10, I would get a 10 in the denominator. So if I divide 4/10 by 10, I would get 400. So 0.04 over 10. Now you can see the denominators. I can, so x over 40 is equal to 400 because I divided 4/10 by 10, then over 100 divided by 10 is 10. Now it's easy to make the denominator 40 by multiplying by 4 and numerator also multiply by 4. So you get, what is 400 times 4? So that is 0.04 times 4. So it is 4 times 4 is 16, remainder 1, 4 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. And 4 times 0 is 0. How many decimals do I need to move? There is only 100th, so 0.16. So it is 0.16 over 40. And the denominators are same now. So x is going to be 1600th or 0.16, which is less than 0.2, because we already discussed that 1% of 40 was 4/10, and half of that would be 2/10, and this and but we are taking only 0.4%, not 0.5%, so that is going to be less than 0.2, which is what we got. X is equal to 1600 or 0.16. 0.16 would be less than 2/10. On a number line, it will be behind. It will be on the left side of 0.2 or 0.20. Now, how do I do the percent equation? So what number, this is the question. What number is 0.4% of 40? Let me erase the other one. Otherwise, it's on our way. And let me pick another color. So what number is 0.4% of 40? That is the question. So let's convert the whole question into an equation. What number is, so that is the unknown x, and in math is means equal to, so x is 0.4%. So 0.4 over 100 of, in math means times 40. So how do I do that? So x is equal to, how do I divide by 100? You move the decimal over twice to the left. So I'll get 0.0 twice. So if I move once, I'll get 0.04, but one more, 0.004 times 40. So you can just multiply 40 by 4 and move 3 decimals because it's thousandth. So this is like 4 over 1000 times 40 over 1. So that will be 160 over 1000. So 160,000 is 0.16. This is a good problem for you to review your decimal skills. So that the answer is 0.16. So let's move on to the next problem. They didn't specify any methods. So let's use proportion and equation and see how we can do this. So I'm going to use two methods. So let's pick another color pen. So what number is 24% of 80? So let's use equation first. Equation. What number is? So x, what number means we don't know that number. That is x. S means equal to. 24% means you can either write 24 over 100 or 0.24. That is the decimal form. Of means multiplication and 80. So you just need to multiply 0.24 by 80. That is the equation. So when you multiply, you can just multiply 24 by 8 or 80. So 24 times 80. So I have a 0, extra 0. That 0, that 80 is 0. I'm just putting that there because I'm multiplying by 10 first, then multiply by 8. 8 times 4 is 32, remainder 3. 2 times 8 is 16, plus 3 is 90. So how many decimals do I need to move? I have 100th. So that means 19.20. Am I right? I think so. 19.20, right? Let's check our let's check if our answer is reasonable. So 10% of 80 is going to be 8. 20% is 16. So 10% of 80 is 8. So 20% would be 16, and 24% is more than 16 and less than 24. Yes, I think our answer is correct. So let's do the next method and see if we are getting the same answer, which is the proportion method. So let's do the proportion method. So for proportion, you need two ratios. One ratio we already know, which is 24 over 100. That is one ratio. And another ratio, we don't know the part, or we don't know what number is so 80 is the total. On the right side, if 100 is the total, 24 of them. So on the left side, 80 is the total and we don't know the part. So x over 80 is equal to 24 over 100. So you can simplify that. You can just divide by 10. So I get a 10 in the denominator. So that's 2 and 4/10 over 10. Now you can multiply. So our proportion is x over 80 is equal to 2.4 over 10. I can multiply by 8 on both sides, on numerator and denominator, to get a 80 here. So what is 2 and 4/10 times 8? So when you multiply, you will get 8 times 4 is 32. Remainder 3, 2 times 8 is 16, plus 3 is 19. 19.2 over 80. Now since we have the same numerator, the same denominator, the numerators have to be equal. So x is equal to 19.2. And we already know that makes sense because 20% of 80 is 16, and 30% of 80 is 24, and 24% will be between 16 and 24, which is 19.2. Hope you understand that. Now let's try to solve some real life problems. A salesperson receives a 3% commission on sales. So for every 3% means 3 over 100. So for every $100 of sale, he can get $3 as commission on top of his salary. The salesperson receives 180 in commission. What is the amount of sales? So we don't know the total, we know the part. So 3% of a number is, so basically 3% of his sale. 3% of the sale is equal to how much? 180. 3% of the sale is equal to 180. So what is the amount of sale? So you can either set up a proportion or an equation. So if I'm setting up an equation, I would go 3% means 0.03 because 300 of means multiplication. Sale is, we don't know, that is s or x or whatever the variable is equal to 180. Now you know solving equations, you need to get rid of 0.03. So you divide both sides by 300. How do you divide by a decimal? You just need to make the denominator a whole number. For that, you can either multiply by 100 or move the decimal over twice to the right. So you will get s is equal to 18,000 over 3, which is going to be 18 divided by 3 is 6. So that's 6,000. So he actually made a sale for $6,000. So the total sale is equal to amount of sale is equal to amount of sale is $6,000. That makes sense because for every $100 he is getting $3 as commission. So how many hundred are there in 6,000? There are only 60 hundred. So 60 times 3, which is 180 degree. So we used equation. Now if you want, we can try using the proportion also. let's do that. Let me erase this to make room for us to work. So we are going to use proportion. If you want, you can rewind and look at the equation. So we are going to use proportion now. So we already know 3%. So that is 3% means 3 over 100 is one of the ratio. And another ratio is 180 is the commission, and we don't know the total amount, which is the whole. How much did he make? So 180 over W is equal to 3 over 100. Can we make the numerator same? Yes, because I can get, if I multiply by 6, I can get an 18. And if I multiply by 60, I should be getting a 180. So I multiply both numerator and denominator by 60. So that means it's 180 over 6,000. That was easy. So 180 over W is equal to 180 over 6,000. So now since we have the same numerator, W is going to be 6,000. So the answer is, the whole part is $6,000. He made a sale for $6,000 and he got $180 as commission. This is on top of his salary. Usually the salespersons, they earn commission when they make sales. So that's $180 dollars he received, and he might have made a sale for $6,000. This is using proportion. So we used, if you are setting up an equation, you literally like read the problem and convert that into an equation. So let's write 14.2 is means equal to in math, and 35.5% means 35.5 over 100 of what? Of means multiplication of what number? That is x. That's the equation. Now, how do I do this problem? So we can write 14.2 is equal to, let's divide by 100. Division by 100 means you move the decimal over twice to the left. So 0.355 times x. Now to get rid of this 355,000, you divide by 355,000 on both sides. Oh, that's a lot of 5. So that's 0.355,000. I divided both sides by the same number. Now our work is, how do I divide 14 and 2/10 by 355,000? So let's try to do that. First I need to move the decimal over 3 to the right to make it a whole number. So I will get 2 extra zeros on the numerator. So that will be, I'm going to use the space on the right. So that is going to be 4. So it is, so I'm going to 14.2 over 0.355 is equal to x. You just need to divide it. So you move the decimal over 3 times. So 1, 2, 3. So that will be 14 and 200, right? Because I need to put it over 355 is equal to x. That's a big number. I think you will get a good answer because I can see 355 times 4 is 4 times 5 20, 4 times 5 20 plus 2 22, 4 times 3 40. So this is equal to 4. So that means its x is equal to 40. So the answer is 40. The 14.2 is 35.5% of 40. So you need to look back and see if that makes sense, because it's 35.5% means more than 30%. So if I took 30% of 40, that is going to be 10% of 40 is 4, 30% is going to be 12. Yes, it is more than 12 and it is less than 16. So 35 point, so that makes sense. X is equal to 40. Now let's try to do that using the proportion. If any of you are trying to do that with proportion, let's try to do that using proportion. So using proportion, you need to, let's look at what color do you want. Okay. So proportion means 14.2 is, so that is the part. So I'm going to put 14.2 over, we don't know the big number, that is the whole, is equal to 35.5 over 100. It's better to like cross multiply. So 35.5 W is equal to 14.2 times 100. So that's 35.5 W is equal to, when you move the decimal to the right, I'm multiplying by 100, 1420. So you can see you need to divide both sides by 35.5. So you will get W is equal to 1420 over 35 and 5/10. When you move the decimal over or multiply by 10, you get 14,200 over 355. And that is what we got before, and we found out this is going to be 4, so that will be 40. So W the whole equal to 40. So that is the proportion method. Now let's move on to an algebra problem. They are asking you what percent of 8x is 5x. So what percent of 8x is 5x? So let's look at that. Let's use equation. What percent of, so x times, of means multiplication, x times 8x is 5x. S means equal to, of is multiplication. So I cannot take x actually. What percent? Because we already have an x, so I'm not allowed to take another x for the percent. So percent, let's take it as p. So that's a common mistake you can make. So remember, if you have an x in the given thing and if you are finding another quantity, use another letter. P times 8x is 5x. So how do I do that? I would divide both sides by 8x to get p. So p is equal to, x divided by x is going to be 1. So I don't need to worry about that. So P is 5/8, but that is not in the form of a percent. You need to convert that into a percent. So let's convert that into a decimal first. 5/8 is, if you remember, 1/8 is 0.125. You can just multiply that by 5, or if you don't remember, you divide 5 by 8. 0 point in 58 goes 6 times, minus 48 in 20. So I can add as many zeros as I want because I put a decimal over here. In 28 goes 2 times, minus 16, 4 in 45 times. So that is going to be 0.625. That is the decimal form. And what is the percentage? Percentage, you move the decimal over twice to the right. So percent is going to be 62.5%. So does that make sense? 62.5% of 8x is 5x. So that is more than half. 50% of 8x is 4x because it's half, and it's a little more than that. That is 5x. That is 62.5% of 5x. 8x is 5x. You can do proportion also on this. So you will get 5x over 8x is equal to x over 100, and you will do that problem. Hope you understand this lesson. The first problem is 36 is 0.9% of what number? I'm just going to use an equation. 36 is, so 36 is means equal to 0.9 over 100 of means is equal to of means multiplication of what number? X. So 36 is equal to 0.09 over 100. 0.9 over 100, that is 0.9% of means multiplication x. So how do I find x? So to find x, I would divide both sides by this quantity. And what is this quantity? Let's write that as a decimal number. If you divide by 100, you will move the decimal to the left because that number is going to go down. So that will be 0.09. No, I need one more 0 because I'm dividing by 100. So I need to move twice to the left. So that means so 36 equal to, I need to move twice to the left, so 0.009x. Now you can just divide both sides by 0.009. So it is 36 over 0.009 is equal to x. Now you need to simplify that. You can move the decimal over 3 times to the right or multiply by 1000. So you will get 36,000 over 9 is equal to x, which is pretty easy because 36 divided by 9 is 4. So x is going to be 4,000. Now let's look back and see if that makes sense. 36 is 0.9% of 4,000. So what is 10% of 4,000 is 400. 1% would be 40. So 36 is very close to 40. So that will be like almost 1%, like 0.9%. So that makes sense. Now let's look at the next problem, which is 75% of 124 is what number? That's a mental math problem because you already know 100% of 124 is what? 124. And you know 25% would be 25% of 124 is divide by 4, right? Because 100 divided by 4 is 25. So 124 divided by 4, which is going to be pretty easy. 12 divided by 4 is 3 and 4, 31. So 25% of 124 is 31. So 75% will be, you just multiply the quantity by 3 because 25 times 3 is 75. So you multiply by 3, and that's easy to multiply also. It's 93. So 93 is 75% of 124. That's mental math. But if you don't remember how to do the mental math, or if you think it's hard, you can use equation, or you can use proportion to do this problem. So let's use equation. So if you are using equation, you will go 75% means 0.75 of means you multiply 124. S means equal to what number is x. So you just need to multiply 124 by 75. So that will be 9300, and you need to move to decimals. So that's x. So x is equal to 93. That's equation. And you can do the proportion also. You want me to do that? I can do proportion also for you. So let's do proportion. If you're using the proportion, you are going to simplify. That will be the easier method because my proportion is one is the percentage, 75 over 100, and 100 is the total, so 124 is the total x. So whole is 124. So now 75 over 100, you already know it's 3/4 times 3/4 is equal to, x over 124. Now look at the denominators. They're kind of like easy to figure out how many 4s is 124, right? 4 times 3 is 12, and 4 times 1 is 4. So you can multiply both sides by 31 to get 124 in the denominator and x. So when you multiply, you will get 93 over 124 is equal to x over 124. Now since the denominators are same, numerator x is equal to 93. So we did lot of problems, and I hope you understand the concept of equation and proportion, and you will be able to choose the easier method for you to do it. So now let's do the last problem. 72 is what percent of 42? I don't know which method you like it. I like equation because 72 is means equal to what percent. So that is out of 100 though, but I'm just going to get that as a fraction. What percent of 45? So you know how to get x. You just divide by 45 on both sides. So x is equal to 72 over 45. Decompose. 72 is a multiple of 9. So I can say 8 times 9, and 45 is also a multiple of 9, which is 5 times 9. And you can kind of guess it is going to be more than 100% because 72 is more than 45. So x is equal to 8 fifth, which is going to be a mixed number 1 and 3 fifth. That means x is equal to 1.3 fifth is 6, 1.6. How much percent is that? Move the decimal over twice, so that's 160%. Is that correct? 72 is 160% of 45. Yes, because 100% of 45 is 40. Another 50% is 22.5. So that is going to be 72 is more than that. So 72 is 160% of 45. Hope you get that. So let's look at the rules now. For percent proportion, we did the part over whole equal to percent, right? So part, we put it on top, and the whole, like the total, is in the denominator. And on the right side, we put the percent. Percent also, the part is 75 and the whole is 100. So the formula is part over whole equal to percent, whatever the percentage is, over 100, or x over 100. So you need to remember that percent means it's not the actual percent. So it's better to do an x there instead of doing percent. So you just do x over 100. So x over 100. Part over whole equal to x over 100. Just remember that. That is the percent. And the equation is, how did we do the equation? To represent A is P% of W, use an equation. A is, so A equal to P% of W. Of means multiplication. So A equal to P times W. So for example, 15 is 0.5% of 30. 15 is 50% of 30.